I think authenticity in the influencer marketing space is a holistic effort between both brand and creators. For example, on the creator side, it's working with brands that align with your values, but also keeping these brands accountable as well should any issues arise because you are loyal to your audience. But also on the brand side, in the same way, it's partnering with creators that, that mirror your values on social media.
We are talking about the holy grail of creator partnerships, and that's authenticity. We're going to talk about how do you achieve it, how do you know you're working with the right partners, and how do you make sure your brand message doesn't get lost? I know Dave and Christy touched on this a lot, and I'm really excited for us to continue to expand on this further. I'm Becca Barkey. I'm the CEO of Illuminate Social, which is a creator management firm. And today I have Shelcy, Christy, and Jack joining me. Would you guys want to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your companies?
Sure. I don't know why everyone's looking at me. Okay, I'll start. Hi, everyone. My name is Shelcy Joseph. I'm a freelance fashion writer based in Brooklyn. By day, I also manage my multimedia fashion lifestyle platform, NYCXCLOTHES. We do brand partnerships, so very much aware of what we're talking about today. We also create our own content, going back to what Dave was talking about, shoppable content, trend roundups, op-eds, and any and all things fashion and lifestyle. I also run NYCX Studio, which is our boutique agency specializing in social media, influencer marketing, and diversity and inclusion.
Hi everyone, I'm the other half of NYCXCLOTHES and NYCX Studio, if you couldn't tell. By day, I head creative for both of our brands, so responsible for visual identity on any digital platform. But by night, I also create freelance videos, specifically directing and filming short films in relations to culture and identity.
And hi everybody, I'm Jack Appleby. I'm a writer and social media consultant. I write Future Social, which is a newsletter teaching 45,000 marketers about social media strategy. My background's coming from a long line of agency social. So I've worked with Beats by Dre, Verizon, Microsoft. I was at Twitch for a spell. All kinds of tech brands on bringing social media AORs to life.
So excited to have this group today that can really speak to what authenticity means. But let's start with, how do we define that? How would you guys define authenticity? Wants to kick it off?
I see lots of faces.
Yeah, we're going to go to Jen first.
I think we've all been to a million talks about what is authenticity in marketing, social media, and creators. We keep talking about it because we're not necessarily nailing it all the time. And it's so contextual to each brand, each creator. Like, you can't just put like a capital A authenticity on a slide and assume everyone knows what that is. So it's how I know what my audience wants. It's how you as a brand know what you're trying to portray, and if you're finding people that are the right fit authentically for that, and you have to define that as a brand. Creators have to define that for themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think authenticity in the influencer marketing space is a holistic effort between both brand and creators. For example, on the creator side, it's working with brands that align with your values, but also keeping these brands accountable as well should any issues arise because you are loyal to your audience. But also on the brand side, in the same way, it's partnering with creators that, that mirror your values on social media beyond the numbers. So when an authentic partnership happens, it breathes life into the space, but also creates cultural shifting conversations.
For sure.
Exactly.
And I think as, the industry evolves, like, consumers are becoming increasingly more social and, demanding that brands become more transparent about everything, from how their products are made to, who makes them and things like that. And so that's only going to become more important, whether or not a brand or a creator, like, they're willing to stand behind the things that they say and what they believe in.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things you guys have said is about radical transparency. And tell us a little bit more about what that means.
Honestly, I think of it as just like from every step of the process, like, is there clear communication and total transparency? So as a creator, and I've also worked on the brand side, when I approach someone to work with a brand, I always already do my homework to make sure that there's clear product affinity, because it's not always, so like obvious that just because a creator is fashion that, they could work specifically for like your let's say like a very niche like part of the fashion market. Like they're not necessarily streetwear. Like there's so many niches to it. And so it's one, doing your homework, but also just like being able to, show the creator that you respect them, and especially in terms of budget, right? Like being honest, saying, hey, like this is a first time partnership. We'd love to, build that into a longer term thing. And so that's what I mean when it comes to just like transparency at every step of the process. Talking about the creative, you're approaching me. Do you trust me to take control of what I'm producing? And then post campaign, what worked, what didn't work? Did you need more lead time? What do you feel like we could do better next time? And so at every step of the process, I feel like there's a great opportunity for both brands and creators to be honest with each other, and that makes for successful partnerships that continue long after the campaign is done.
Yes, trust is so integral to having an authentic partnership.
Central.
Exactly. What are some examples of how you've seen brands trust you throughout the process? I think for one, we can all see when we see those briefs that feel more like scripts, and it's just like, okay, I'm walking on a tightrope trying to do a good partnership here, and if I mess up, then it's really hard to then feel like you're going to do a good job. So yeah, what are some examples?
For like a granular example is when the brand, they completely trust you with the creative vision. So yes, there's a brief because of course there's key messages that you need to hit, especially when you're sharing on social, but also just making sure that at every step of the way we have everything we need in terms of like communicating what is it that they want, and letting us run with the idea, and knowing that we actually know our audience. That's what they're hiring us for, and just like making sure that it aligns not only with them but also within our own social media and also our audience's needs and wants. So complete creative control is one of the ways that brands have been super transparent in working with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just did a campaign with SurveyMonkey, who I've worked with before. First one, we kind of did a lot of their version, and the second one, I pitched them. I had this idea where, like, I moved to New York 6 weeks before the pandemic started. It was a rough 3 years. It was very hard for me to make friends at that time. So I had started this like gentleman's dinner where I was just looking for like wholesome guys in their 30s who did not want to just like go drinking every Friday night.
Yeah.
And I did it for fun a couple of times, just like bringing people from different walks of life together. When SurveyMonkey approached me for a second campaign, I pitched them on like, let me use your tool to ask these kind of people what they're looking for from these kind of environments. And they paid for this dinner, and I brought more people together this time and got to document the whole thing, and that became the ad.
That's amazing.
I love that. It's kind of like a brand meeting you halfway.
Exactly.
Exactly. From the manager perspective, I rarely see a time when we get to pitch a concept and the brand's like, yep, let's go with it. It's always, oh, that's not on my timeline, or this is our, what we want to do. So I'd love to know, like, what is successful for you guys when you are pitching to a brand and saying, this is my concept, and actually seeing that come to life?
Also, we want an invite. For me, honestly, we have long-term relationships with our partners. It's very rare for us to do a one-off partnership, and we always try to follow up with the brands afterwards just to like maintain a relationship. And we've had these partners where, each year it's kind of exciting to see the ways that we can partner together, because it's not always just limited to Instagram. And so some of the best and like most successful partnerships we've had, for example, are brands that are like, it's ongoing, right? And it's based on what you have as a creator that they can leverage. So you mentioned the gentleman's dinner. Great integration, right? Super seamless the way you did it. And so I think like when a creator also does, they have a blog, and in our case, like we have the agency, like we've done partnerships where we started advising them behind the scenes, and it all just started from conversations that we were having. And so to me, I think when there's trust, right? And we know what each other, like what we're up to, and that's why we keep up often, and we send out news and let you know, like, hey, like we do events, like would you want to dress our speakers? And we'd also we happen to be wearing Tory Burch right now. That's like one way that we partner with them often, right? And so I think for brands, like thinking beyond just social, because sure, it will always tie back to social, but if there's that bigger connection, that's when the creator will ultimately become like your brand ambassador.
Exactly, being less transactional.
Right.
Yes. Nope, please.
One of my favorite partnerships that we had was with French Connection. We worked with them, I think like 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, on just like paid posts for like a year or two. And then ultimately in 2020, when the George Floyd happened, they reached out to us so we could consult because we had our agency. So we did a workshop for them in front of their whole company, and it was all about D&I and really how to be a better company in 2020. So that was one of my favorites. And the brand really meeting us halfway and actually using our skills and all of that.
Behind the scenes. No
Yeah.
one knew.
No one knew.
Exactly.
Yeah, just LinkedIn though.
Yeah, LinkedIn
I
did.
think
LinkedIn
that
do.
kind of leads into another part that I want to speak on, and that's authenticity versus accountability. And how do brands like French Connection, that's a great example where, they want to be an ally, they want to be supportive, but they don't want it to come across in an inauthentic way. So, I mean, obviously coming to you guys as consultants, that's a great start, but, how can you really continue to carry that?
Yeah, that's one that we're still trying
The $1
to
million question.
get brands to commit to. I think the accountability and the follow-up part is the hardest, especially when you're dealing with issues of D&I, because unfortunately it doesn't tend to be prioritized. And so I think it's just, having those conversations with them and actually following up until they don't have anything else to say, right? Like, so sometimes, I don't believe in one and done, like workshops, one and done partnerships, like ever. I don't think those are the most effective. And so I always make it a point to, ask myself, here's what more we can offer. Let's make sure that this work is continuing. It's not like a one-time thing that you just wanted to say that you did. And, whether or not the brand responds positively and continues is beyond my control. But I feel like as a brand, the best marketing always is to just be honest and to listen to what your consumers want. And if they say that, they don't see themselves represented in the marketing that you do, or your products don't serve them, then you might also want to capitalize on their buying power by listening to them and doing the things that they want. It's like a long-term play that not a lot of people sort of think about, but it's just as important, and it pays dividends both in the immediate and long-term future.
Absolutely. Yeah. How do you guys feel like as consumers that helps you be beber creators?
That's a good one.
Good question.
And more authentic. I think one thing I know that we discussed was the Pedialyte example.
Yes.
And once a brand actually leaned into the fact that, like, okay, this is how consumers are using our brand. Pedialyte is a little bit of a hangover cure for people. It's not just replenishing nutrients.
I mean, every brand will decide how they think people should use their product, but the consumers will decide like what you are actually for. Like I worked at a headphone company that had over-ear headphones, like the in-ear headphones, they had everything. And like it's very much a meme where people wear the over-ears, like even though they have athletic headphones. I tried to pitch that for social content when I worked there, and I was told they're using the wrong headphones. It's like, no, they've decided.
Right.
Yeah, the consumers were wrong. Mistake was their fault. But I mean, this is where like you just have to see like how people want to engage with your brand, and it's out there for you. Like it's getting out of the offices, it's getting out of your conference rooms, and actually engage with people who use your products. Maybe using them yourselves. Like I'm always shocked how many creative directors I've worked with who have never touched the product we've worked on for 2 years.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I think too, I think a lot about like how does this product naturally fit into my life, right? I've seen very creative takes on like marketing bags, for example. Like people do it by like taking out very like strange things that don't fit, obviously, but like puts the emphasis back on the bag. So like someone will pull like a bottle of champagne from like a bag, but it ties back to the idea of like my bag is like this trustworthy thing that's always with me, and the things that are in it are just as important as the bag itself. And so not a lot of brands are willing to experiment with like the creativity of it. And one example from an ad we did last summer was for a sunscreen brand, Supergoop. And a lot of the advertising that I used to see would be people just applying it in their room. And while that's true, it's very much like a step in the routine that everyone does. Like for me, I always have it with me. And so if I'm like traveling, I apply it every 3 hours. My sisters who are doctors always remind me to apply my sunscreen all the time. And so for us, when we did the ad and we went away, I thought it was more authentic to show how we're applying it at different steps of like the itinerary, because I didn't want it to just be confined to my room and then not go outside. I'm like, come on, guys, like we're using it in real life. Let's actually document that. And they were very open to that, and it did really well. So.
Great.
Another thing that's also important, I think brands, when they want to see how consumers are using their products, they really should go on their tagged photos on Instagram. I know it's very technical, but like when you go on your tagged photos, you really get to see the true customers, like these people who don't necessarily have a following, like it'll be the moms, in like Ohio or something, like they are the ones who are the true customers, like they're showcasing their audience, how they want to use the product. So like using that tool is very key.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, so I do some work with GoPro, and they are really incredible when it comes to influencer marketing, and then UGC within that.
I've seen those vlogs.
They're amazing. And one of the things they do is they do uncover emerging influencers simply through tagged photos. Like I went with them to Switzerland last year for their creator summit. There were creators there who had never worked with a brand before, who had like that 20,000 type of follower range, who were on an all expenses paid trip to get thrown out of a plane, go paragliding, try the new products, and like shoot all of this content. They found them through tagged photos on Instagram.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
GoPro
so
gets
good.
it. I love it.
That's so good.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I think that answers our question is how do you find the right partners? It's looking at who's tagging your products organically, who's already a consumer of your products, and also look in your inbox, who's pitching to you. I think there's so many times that people ignore those emails, and it's like that person is passionate and wants to tell a story, and they're important too. So I love that.
I remember we talked about the Reformation case study, and I don't know if anyone knows this, but there was this like viral newsletter about Reformation's like sneaky social strategy. I don't think that they liked that they were outed, but it did do for marketing. And essentially, they were taking viral TikTokers and having them recreate the video for Instagram in their clothes, and so it would go viral. And then the creator would be wearing, whatever, and then they'd give them Reformation clothes to do the exact same thing. And so the way that Instagram people sometimes consume TikTok is on Instagram. And so there was that like recognizability factor. And then they had a sneaky little shoppable link under there for people to shop in case, after you watch the video, you want the top that she's wearing, which I thought was brilliant. Right. And it's not one of those that has like a direct ROI because there's no mention of Reformation in the video, but people actually kind of liked it.
Yeah.
When you talk about authenticity, like on a platform, like on TikTok, parodying trends is very, very common. Like, and if you see the same video over and over and over again, you're not fazed by that. So it's like that is authentic within a platform.
Exactly.
And I think another way to find creators is making sure that you're differentiating your search. For example, like Instagram creators are not the same as TikTok creators.
Exactly.
Like I can't stress that enough. Like the way they go about, creating an ad is different. The way they go about talking to their audience. So making sure that you have a dedicated person for each social like media to really like focus on like finding them and just making sure that the partnership kind of fits for them and speaking to their audiences.
Yeah.
So doing research, honestly, spending time on
Gotta do a
TikTok.
little bit of that research. And I think, moving on to someone who does a lot of research in his newsletters, Jack, one thing I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up because this just happened in the last 24 hours, but you really analyzed Mr. Beast's video that just came out and like broke some records, and it was like a 14-minute, very engaging video. I'd love you to speak to a lot of the things you wrote about in there, but, how can creators also look at that and be like, I want to emulate what he did that's engaging and worked, but also have my own authentic twist.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think a lot of people look at where Mr. Beast is now and they see dollar signs. Like he's showing off $1 billion yachts. It's really a cruise ship in his latest video. And they say, okay, I can't achieve this scale. That is not actually the magic of what has made him who he is. Like 12 years ago, he started making like very silly videos that were conceptually the same. They were just very scaled down. So like creators or brands can look at someone like that and look at these different storytelling tactics that he's using, because his number one metric is retention. He doesn't want you to just click in. He wants to keep you for a full 14 minutes. He wants to trigger multiple ads. He wants to show his ad partners how long he's kept you around. And so my thread's on Twitter, and Time Magazine just featured it today on their website. It shows they do like little avatars in the corners of screens to show you like in the middle of the video which yacht you are actually looking at. He introduces captions, not persistent throughout the video, but in shots where there is not a lot of action to add emphasis. Like his graphic treatments are not persistent either. They pop in at different times. He'll introduce characters, like he had one of his buddies in this video who missed the boat, literally missed the boat. They use that as a B plot line, like the way a 30-minute sitcom might. So he's using all sorts of incredible like scripting and storytelling tactics to make these videos that are highly compelling. And anyone can do that, whether you have budget or not.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it reminds me also of the 10-minute Hilton ad that came out on TikTok. I mean, I watched the entire 10 minutes because I wanted to know which celebrity was coming on next. You know, it started with Paris Hilton and it continued to go, and you were just like, who's gonna pop on here next? But it was so interesting, but what felt so authentic, it really didn't feel scripted, which is interesting because there was probably a lot of scripting behind it.
Well, I think this is where, like, for creators like Jimmy, Mr. Beast, or like take like a Casey Neistat, those are creators who like they tell the story within the edit.
Yep.
So like it's not truly scripted, but they understand the story beats. They know how to craft like their narrative, and then within the edit, this is how I do my own videos. Like I see what I have, and I start to link those beats together.
Exactly.
And I think that's a beautiful part too about like creating on social media. Like a lot of times I've realized that creators on YouTube or Instagram, whether it's like short form or long-term content, they really pack a movie within the 1 minute or the 15 seconds or the 10 seconds. And the art of grabbing people's attention is something that I think like a lot of people underestimate, but it's really key to just selling anything, but also having these cultural shifting conversations.
Yes. Another thing I want to make sure that we discuss today is just how brands are starting to hire personalities in-house. And I think that's a really interesting shift because you're now getting a brand who wants to be more authentic and more relatable to their end consumer and not just this static content of like, you know, here's that product, it's a static feed picture and like, what is that story actually telling? So yeah, what do you think about that, about these personalities really coming out behind the camera?
I think it needs to happen more. I think it's to make for a lot more effective social content. Like, to me, the big light bulb moment was like that hot second where HQ Trivia was the thing, where Scott Rogowski was the face of that app. Like, and he was a draw for why you came and played it. I mean, now that we're in the TikTok generation, like, having a human face for your brand is vitally important. And it's creating all sorts of new things where it's like people who have not been media trained, social media managers potentially, are becoming like very much the face of these brands. Like I have a friend she was a freelance social media strategist, and she was hired by, and I'm not kidding here, a female audio porn app to grow their TikTok, and she made herself the face of that and grew to 150,000 followers. And she, like, her and I talk about it a lot, and she's like, I couldn't have done that unless I was willing to be out there, because people want to see someone talk about these things now.
Right.
And I honestly, we're having these conversations with a lot of potential brand partners right now for TikTok because some brands don't feel too comfortable having a face on their TikToks. And so far I've seen them just like repost their campaigns. I'm like, don't do that, guys. Like, please, you know, like a free marketing idea, hire a collective of creators who are responsible for producing a number of videos a month for you, whether it's your store employees, right? If there's still time, like the best thing that you could do is like hauls, for example, showcasing the latest and greatest at the store, right? Or just like documenting what the day-to-day is like. Like the brands that are killing it on TikTok are offering you these like pulling the curtains kind of view, like the Washington Post, for example, like what's going on in the newsroom. Like you'll remember to check the articles because they're doing very serious work and they figure out how to marry humor into the content. And so I always tell brands, like, just lead with the story. Your product will always be part of it, but always lead with the personality. And of course, there is a risk to attaching your brand even for a certain period of time to a specific phase, but that's where kind of doing your homework comes in, making sure it's not someone who's problematic, and you know, if they are, like, have a plan for dealing with that if it happens eventually, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Nerf did this really successfully. So Nerf hired a chief TikTok officer as like a vanity title.
Amazing.
And they had a couple million followers of their own on TikTok. They are the face of the Nerf TikTok now, and all the content comes from them. So it's efficient. It's someone who understands the platform. It's someone who's allowed to experiment, has been given the reins. Like, go. Like, we're a big brand. We know you're gonna like have some hits, have some flops. Like, just make things and see what happens.
Yeah. And also, I'm sorry, Chris.
No, I was saying Ryan Air on TikTok is another company that does really like funny videos. Like they use their flight attendants to kind of just like create any sort of scenario, but at the same time, they're educating people because a lot of people have a fear of traveling and like flying. So they use some of their pilots sometimes to like reassure them and showing them the mechanics of like what it actually means to fly. But then they'll also have the occasional funny TikTok. So it's like a perfect balance of like education and just like entertainment.
And financially, it makes sense.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
like to think of the number of campaigns that a brand would do to end up posting on TikTok, it doesn't, you know, take off, no one sees it, versus just paying someone a flat rate for an entire year to produce content for you. Like the math of that, like eventually it adds up, like it makes sense. There's a big ROI that you may not see now, but it's less costly than having a team out each time to create those really beautiful produced campaigns that just don't move the needle the same way.
Yeah,
true.
I think something, Jack, that I love that you touched on was allowing some of the content to flop, because it's not always going to be successful. And I think brands get so worried about this has to succeed, or like, why didn't it? And then if it didn't, it's just like, okay, on to the next creator, and not giving that creator maybe another chance. So, you know, how can we learn from those flops or those failures and actually continue the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, when I was running like social media, like year-long social media campaigns for like a Microsoft, like we knew what content would hit. And like we were always looking for content that we knew would perform like slightly above average, keep growing. And that was specifically so we could then spend more time on very experimental things. It's important because if you don't try for experiments, you'll also never achieve virality, which becomes a really common problem like in brand social media. Like I worked on the TV show Community for their final season. We figured out this comment style where I could generate like, let's call it B+ results, and my art director could make a week's worth of content in one day, and that allowed her to spend 3 days taking huge swings at things that might go viral for us.
Yeah.
And she had a great hit rate, like 40% of them would double our engagement rate. And then some would just be completely average, and that was fine because we just hit the average.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I think repurposing content is also very important too. Like if you post it and it doesn't do well, unfortunately, you can like find different ways to like maybe share it on stories or like even do a live with it. Like I think a lot of times brands forget that like you can spin, twist, turn like a piece of content and like have it hit a different audience each time.
Yeah, and also I have a good example from when we did our campaign with Cause through our agency. So this was a brand that we had been working with for 2 years before launching our agency, and eventually we were able to parlay the relationship into it. And they did this video with Paula Sutton, Hill House Vintage. I don't know if anyone knows her, but she's amazing. And she was this woman that I had been following for quite some time, and I saw total like partnership and affinity between her and Cause, but I hadn't seen them necessarily featuring a lot of like midlife, sort of midlife, I think, middle-aged women in their content who are also very much experts in their own rights and fashion leaders. And so we concepted this video that they did where she's known for like living in a castle and hosting these really like beautiful like lunches on her terrace or like patio or anything like that. And I was like, this is perfect. Cause is like a lifestyle-oriented brand. She always talks about the product in such an educated, she was an editor, you know, she has an eye for interior decor, like the whole thing comes together. And so she created the video, and to this day, it's like the best, like top like number of on the Cause like feed. And so it was an example of, you know, allowing things to take a life of their own, because they had their series for a while, right? And like it did fine, right? Not terrible number wise, but it still took a bunch of videos to get to that number with Paula. And we had comments like, oh, thank you for finally featuring a woman like me. We have the money ultimately, so thank you, right? And so that kind of thing, especially talking about like metrics, like you can't put a value on a comment like this because this is someone who will now most likely shop Cause. So.
And I also think that brands should think beyond the like, as much as yes, you want to follow your brand values and like your ideal persona, it's also important to keep in mind that like there may be other people who use your products. So going out of that box, like for example, like they wouldn't have partnered with Paula hadn't we brought her into the foreground. So like making sure that you're hitting different audience of the market and like A/B testing and seeing what really works is very important.
A/B testing. I'm glad you hit on that because that is so important, and I think brands forget that when they're so like, okay, we need this to go viral. We need this campaign to be successful, and it's almost like the more you want something to go viral, the less likely it's going to happen. You know, you need to let the control go a little.
Well, I think that's where it's important. Like, if you're a brand hiring an influencer, like for some sort of creator partnership, understand that you're mostly aiming for their average results. If you hit virality, wonderful. But like judge them based on their average performance. Be happy with that. And creators are good at what they do. Creators also want to get views. You're going to get to that meter.
Right.
Like, if you do better, amazing.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, like I think virality it's important, but it also can be like a slippery slope too.
Forget it.
Yeah, I think consistent growth over like a long period of time kind of attracts more like audience loyalty.
Yeah.
For us, like we've worked with Tory Burch, for example, since 2018, and now like I have people come up to me and be like, "Wow, I didn't think I would shop at Tory Burch until I saw you guys," and it's been 5 years at this point, so they really associate us with the brand. So like a lot of times, like when campaigns do well or like not amazingly, not amazing numbers, like having that consistency over years can mean a lot more than just like one viral video that people will forget about, in like, I don't know, a month or something.
Exactly.
And that's where doing your homework comes in, because if a brand micromanages the entire process, has the scripted brief, like the content will not do
perform.
Well. Like it will not.
What's an ideal brief? Now that we have all these people in this room that probably put briefs together, what to you is like, this was a perfect brief that I got, and I'm able to create authentic content?
Honestly, a few pages, nothing. We've gotten 12, 16 page briefs, and I'm like, you guys.
Wow.
But honestly, not more than 5 usually. Like with one page having like a mood board of some kind with like their ideal sort of like settings and poses and things. One with the key messaging, of course, what the collection is about, what are the hashtags that we should use. Maybe one with like timeline, just so you have a sense of what it is. But just like very key and really just and like informative, like just, how do I say that? It's like suggestive, It's not like, this is what we want you to do. It's very much, you can have do's and don'ts, that's fine. Like no sunglasses in the content, it's like great, thank you. Like alcohol brands, for example, when we've partnered with them, I need to know what my do's and don'ts are.
Yes.
Even so much as like having a certain kind of glass, they might not approve it.
You can't drink in the photo.
Yes, you can't drink in the photo. So I actually appreciate longer, but then again, it makes sense for that product, right? So many legal kind of like regulations there. But yeah, generally give me an overall feeling and direction. And I understand not every creator reads briefs or pays attention to things like that, which again goes back to knowing who you're working with, right? If this is someone who conduct themselves professionally, they're responsive via email, chances are you don't need to spoon feed them every step of the way.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm curious what your thoughts are about briefing calls, and for every partnership, or is it like what type of partnership is where it's warranted?
I've done every version of them. And I mean, so I'm typically a B2B creator. So like a lot of my sponsors are B2B SaaS analytics companies that have a lot of like proprietary words that I don't know.
Yeah.
So I need that, like my newsletter today is sponsored by a brand lift platform.
Right.
I needed to do a demo call with them so I could fully understand it. Because even though I was not the analytics person when I worked at agencies, I will get emails from my readers like, oh, what did you like about this? And it's important to me to be very educated on that if I'm gonna run an ad based on them. So like for some of the platforms I'm working with now, like I've had several demo calls to make sure I feel expert enough to speak on their behalf. Now that said, to the briefing talk, I want a one sheet that has a couple of bullet points, my mandatories, and then I also want all of your decks on the side. So if I need to dive into that, come up with creative concepts, like we can do stuff like that. So like that same sponsor I have today, we decided to work together on building a study that showed how hashtag ad performed versus hashtag partner versus other types of FTC disclosures. And we used their platform to do that. We came up with that together because they gave me enough decks where I could understand like, okay, my audience wants to know social media strategy. How can we use your platform to prove that? And like, I'm very excited to publish this study that is a sponsored content study. And that's because we were able to work together so closely on that.
And that makes sense, right? Like when the product is either not so easily adoptable, like you need to understand how to use it. If it's a tech product, for example, like those VR, like sunglasses, for example, like I would need a briefing call. In general, I think most briefing calls, like to be honest, are not necessary because the products are very straightforward.
Especially if you use them.
Right. Like if it's a fashion, like a new collection, like I don't necessarily need a briefing call. Like I know how to use it, but when there's like an event component or like a trip, like when there are multiple details, I think briefing calls are helpful just to like structure and know and plan out ahead of time, like your content, things like that. So in those cases, events, travels, complicated products.
Right. I remember when we worked with Campari, an alcohol brand, they had a briefing call because they were taking us to New York Film Festival. So that was important because you needed to know like who was going to be there, like when can you take your photos, like who can you talk to, etc. So when it's very technical, like it totally makes sense.
Also, alcohol brands, terrified
Alcohol
of them.
brands,
So I will be on
Alcohol
every
brands.
briefing call and read every single line.
Yeah,
I get that. When do you know when you want to turn down a partnership, when a brand isn't going to be authentic to you? And also, I mean, to that point, like, when is it far down the line and you're like, I gotta pull out of this because this is not gonna be an authentic post of mine? And people have to do that sometimes. It's not fun to pull out late in the game, but...
Yeah, I mean, mine's tricky because I write about creative strategy for marketers.
Yep.
So if I do a sponsorship, I need to show it as a strategically creative idea for like my own benefit, for their benefit, so they can see how this stuff works. So for me, I can be like a little picky, I think, with my sponsors because of that. Like I had a Canadian wellness clinic asked to sponsor my newsletter. I don't know why they wanted that. Oh, and I just was like, hey, like I don't think I can do anything for you. Like I was not gonna be a good fit. Like it's really important to me, like if I'm asking sponsorship deals, that I know I can provide really high value to you. So like because of like things that even are kind of a cultural fit for me, if I'm not confident like that I can even figure out the ad for them, I've actually turned those down at times because like if I can't deliver huge value where you want to come back a second, third, fourth time, it's actually not worth it for me to take like the couple grand that could come with that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I think for us, for example, a skinny coffee
club,
company,
way back in the days,
reached out to us, and we don't drink coffee and also not trying to lose weight. So it's like, that's not gonna do it.
Yeah, in some cases it's very obvious. Like we've never talked about the product. Like energy drinks, not something we've talked about. Not that, you know, like everything's a conversation, but it's just not our brand, right? Like some cases are very obvious. But I think like there are times when when you're far into the process, you realize that the content is not going to do well because the brand is like micromanaging every aspect of it, especially when it's like agency mediated, which I often find removes the fun out of it. And so I think I am very honest. Like sometimes like we even debate like the cover of a reel, and I'm like, you guys, come on. And so in some cases I'm like, you know, we've given this the best that we could. We thought of the concept, we shot it, you know, and we are writing the caption in a voice that feels very authentic to us. But, you know, you're making it really hard for us to just go all the way with this. So if this is what you want to do, then we will. But just please know ahead of time that this might affect performance. So that way, because it's so far into the process that sometimes you can't just back down and like, you know, you still have a team to compensate. You still have the time that you had invested in it. And so usually the brand will say, okay, great. Like, trust you, go ahead.
That's my go-to line as well. It's like, hey, like I'm happy to do this for you. But can't promise results if you want me to do it that way. And like, I think 100% of the time, they have backed down off like small things that they want.
And I also don't want bad performing ads on my page all the time either.
Right?
So like if like a brand micromanages it and it's like boom, it flops, then I know I probably will not work with this brand again.
I think it brings us into, you know, another topic I want to make sure we discuss quickly here is about approvals. And I think the screenshot that was on the screen earlier was like somebody who's like, hey, we just have one more thing you want to add in here. And like, it was like 10 messages from like the brand to the influencer. And I think that like the feedback loop process is what can get really hectic. And, you know, from the management side, we're always like, we want one round of approvals. You've got one time to send your feedback. We'll either, you know, we'll incorporate that and then we're going live. You know, how can that process just get a little bit tedious and lose some of the authenticity?
I think when there's too many rounds of approval, it doesn't feel like the brand trusts the creators.
Exactly.
It's like if there's 4 rounds, that's just way too many.
Or when there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
Right.
We had that situation very recently where the brand wanted a minimum of 2 rounds of approval, which we've never seen before, right? And like usually for us, we take our content so seriously, we almost never have that language in our contract because we over communicate. You know exactly what you're getting from us, right? And like our page gives you a good idea of the kind of content we create. And, you know, it felt like the brand didn't trust us. And they were like, oh, no, it's not that we don't trust you. It's just like the legal stuff. I'm like, yeah, but it's trust you, you know, like you actually just don't trust us. So I think removing that by, you know, understanding the brief, knowing what the creator is going to make for you. Some brands require the content before the concept before the content is shot, which I think helps, mitigate how much time it might take to approve. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of on the anomaly side as far as how many rounds I will work with somebody on the content. Mostly because, again, a lot of the people that I work with are platforms, and I'm looking for long-term partnerships. So is it ideal for me to go 5 rounds on a 40-word or a 200-word text post? No. But I kind of view it as relationship building for me. It's for people who I want to continue to work with. I mean, I've had people who sponsor me at one company, they change jobs and sponsor me at the next company.
Right.
So it's not ideal, but I find I'm willing to go a lot of rounds with people just to make sure that they feel really, really good about it, and it feels like a partnership.
But I think it makes sense for what you do.
Yeah.
Especially for video content, there's a lot that can go into the edits. So,
Right.
So you're willing to
all
do
about it's all case by case.
Exactly. And like you said, I mean, the creator is also trying to continue that relationship and make sure that they feel good about everything. But I think we touched on so many amazing things today. I think we really gave you guys a lot of tools for, how to have really authentic, relatable partnerships. And it's up to the brands to really walk the walk and do that all correctly. So, we talked today about how to find the right partners. Don't provide overwhelming briefs. Really allow some trust there so that you can have a very authentic and meaningful long-term relationship with creators that's not just so transactional. So I think thank you guys for joining today. Yes, I think the main point is that creators are not a media buy. They have a unique perspective and point of view, and they're really helping you get to that end game, which is the consumer.
Absolutely.
This was great. Thank you, everyone.